Happy holidays, Goslings!
Oh,
Hey! Holiday cheer for everyone, except for the obvious exception of like most of us.
sure.
Yeah, it is suddenly the tundra outside. It is beautiful and snowy, but also so cold. And we're technically all decking the halls, but like some of us have a less holiday spirit than normal. It's like 2 years of pandemic living is real rough. Um, and we figured that just knowing that some of us maybe are feeling more stressed than usual, it's maybe important to like think about our like family and friend interactions because like those might be a little bit trickier than normal, knowing how to communicate with folks, and that's the name of our game. So
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I like to think a lot about is how consent has applications in our lives outside of just like in the moment of sexual intimacy with our partners. Um, and it can have really valuable impacts on the way we navigate relationships with our family, with a close group of friends, with just our community in general. And that feels like an extra important thing to check in about now during the holidays and also during an ongoing pandemic. So we have Olivia Harris here today, our associate director, to talk to us a little bit more about that and to give us some tools for consent during the holidays.
Hi, y'all. It's really nice to see you.
or like be seen by you. We're not live anymore.
Yeah. I'm excited that Hot Goss is back, truly. And it feels really important. One of my bugaboos is holistic health and how consent is part of holistic health and like a whole human being. We are not separate parts. Everything is interrelated. So like physical health, which I imagine many of us are really concerned with right now, mental health, social health, spiritual health, sexual health, all super connected. And so it's really important to recognize that like when we're not at our best or when we're not feeling 100%, that has ramifications. So like when you're not feeling 100%, it can be really hard to set and hold boundaries. And consent is important. Boundaries are important because they're about keeping everybody as safe as possible. So respecting consent with yourself, checking in with yourself, making sure you are asking for what you need is really important, and maybe as if not more critical as checking in with others.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, Olivia, about this like piece of checking in with ourselves. Um, I feel like frequently when we talk about consent, we talk about it in terms of like, this is a tool that I use when other people are around, but we don't really think about the ways in which like it applies to yourself as an individual. And like if we're constantly pushing ourselves through like a point of discomfort or like a moment that we said we were trying to avoid, that's not great, right? Like part of our well-being is like being kind to ourselves. And I think almost like as a rule of thumb, like realizing that if it is bad to like coerce other people to push them past their points of comfort, then it's also bad for us to like do that to ourselves, right? And so that's a really good reframe that you gave us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to offer one more, which is I love to draw distinctions and boundaries. That's how my brain works. And I think it's really important to talk about discomfort as separate from unsafety. Certainly related, but discomfort is not always exactly the same thing. And in fact, I've been in education my entire career. Discomfort is often a sign of growth. Also, can be preface to harm. Unsafety is much more likely to be a preface to harm. And it feels really important to be able to tease out for ourselves in any situation, am I uncomfortable? Am I unsafe? Am I both? Like, what's going on? And you may not know yet. And that's okay. That's really good information around like, I don't know if I'm uncomfortable or unsafe. It might be a really important starting place for you.
Can I like just like repeat something just like for the people in the back, make sure everyone heard that it's that discomfort is sometimes a preface to harm, whereas unsafety is often a preface to harm. That's I think a really great way of looking at it. You know, thank you. I like that.
Yeah. And I feel like it's that specific distinction that I think comes up a lot, just in general. Hello, Norma. When we are talking about going back home for the holidays, you know, I feel like it's kind of like almost like a given, like, experience that we might fall into is that when you're going home for the holidays, you might find yourself almost in this like educator role where you might be the person in your family that people go to for pandemic advice, or that they go to for like updates on the pandemic, and you are not an expert but you want your family to be safe. Or you might be the person that they go to for discussions about social justice issues. Or there, you know, you might feel like you have the opportunity or the duty to help people expand and grow their views, or you might feel like you have to push yourself to talk about those things when you don't want to. And that is obviously taxing and exhausting in some cases, but it's often also worthwhile and necessary to be like diving deep and having those conversations. But separating that identification of, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable, can be really hard to do.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because like trying to figure out, am I unsafe or am I uncomfortable, that so many of us wait until we're actively at the point of unsafety to set a boundary. And it's like, no, we can actually just like do that ahead of time, right? Like we can make sure that we like don't even begin to approach those grounds.
Yeah.
And it felt like there were kind of like two, like if I'm understanding correctly, there were kind of two things that you brought up, Mackenzie. There's one of like, what if for whatever reason I feel like it's my duty to kind of like play this educator role, and then the other one is like, what if I just don't want to, right? Like, what if I'm like too tired, too frustrated, whatever? Cool. I'll take the first one because I think as someone that's like been doing education for a long time, I feel like my brain is always like, help people have teaching moments. And so I have to like remind myself about all these things. I think the biggest thing that I have to tell myself, especially I think in these holiday moments when I'm seeing people I don't see all the time, and especially right now with like the way the world has been going, is that people can and only will change when they really like are committed to it, right? Like when they're ready for it, when they want to, something like that. All I can do is help to expose them to like new ideas or new conversations, but I cannot force that to happen, right? And so I think like the first things first is like, if you feel like it is on you to be the one that like helps explain like Black Lives Matter to your like your grandfather, or if it's on you to like tell your like your uncle why it's important to get vaccinated, it isn't on you to fix them, right? Or like I shouldn't say fix it. It's not on you to like change their opinions, right? Like it's purely up to them. All you can do is let yourself be a resource. So remember that. And then I would say the second thing is there's a difference between people being genuinely interested and someone making polite conversation, right? And so there's times that I think it's really, again, when you haven't seen someone in a long time, especially with a lot of us that haven't been socializing as much, if you're around someone, it's just like floodgates open, right? And I think remembering that a lot of people are exhausted, a lot of people have different like kind of like triggers and sensitive points than maybe they normally have. And so if you're noticing that you're going on about something, be it the pandemic or like a social issue, whatever, and you kind of see like people's like posture and their body language and their responses start to change, be really aware of that. Like nonverbal communication is really critical in consent. And so some of those things might be like physically distancing themselves, right? If they're like leaning in for a conversation and then start to move back, if they're looking around, if their like responses stop being sentences, they're just like, oh, yeah, then like those are all cues that maybe it's a good time to move forward to something else. Yeah. And with moving forward to something else,
I also want to talk about that feeling of like, this is often my role, but I just don't wanna, which is like, we were really good at saying at the start of the pandemic and are less good at saying now that like just doing the day to day is enough. Like showing up, being as present as you can be, navigating a world that's changing, weird, uncertain, scary, is enough and is great, and you're doing great. And so if you find yourself being like, oh, I don't show up how I normally do, and that makes me feel unhappy or whatever else, like that's okay. You can also just know that you're not going to show up the way you normally would from 2, 4, 8 years ago. Tell people that it's okay to be like, I am having trouble being present, but I'm thrilled to be here. I bet people will get that. Being upfront about your needs is really important, I think, especially with any kind of family, whether it's like relationship, kin family, or found family, or friend family, or a partner, or harder to communicate this with a pet, but like being upfront about your needs is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we do that? You know, like what are some ways that we can kindly set boundaries with our family? And what are some ways that we can like kindly check in about what the goalposts or like structure of our boundaries are for ourselves?
I love that energy of bringing us to something concrete.
Yeah. A couple of things, speaking of concrete, I think being specific is one of the kindest things you can do when you set a boundary, because when you say this isn't working, or like I need something else, the person or people you're talking to don't know what that is, only you do. So I need 15 minutes. I can't see you inside unless everybody's masked or double masked. I need us all to take rapids before we meet up. Whatever your boundary is, being as specific as possible, and then letting the people respond truly, right? We can't find rapids or take rapids, or we aren't wearing masks or whatever. That's really good information to have, right? So that you don't put yourself in a position where you do feel like you have to push past your comfort.
Right.
Yeah. I think I too have thoughts. Can I say things?
Please. Yeah. And then I'm going to say a thing.
And then like we're all gonna say things. So I think the first thing, oh yeah. So I think that's I feel like I keep like going through like what are our kind of our tactics when it's like sexual consent or romantic consent, and like reapplying them. And I think one of them is like delay of gratification, right? And so I think like being able to say, oh, that's a really interesting conversation that I just don't want to have right now, right? Or that I can't have right now. Or like, oh, sweet, like when I see you next week for New Year's, or like let's set up a call for next week and we'll talk about this. But I think that like delay of gratification, that principle works here. That you're not saying you never want to have these conversations with people. It's just now might not be the time. So that's one. Then I think the second thing that pops into my mind is related to what you were just talking about, Olivia, and it's something about kind of like managing expectations for the space. But almost maybe it's better said as like managing what your goals are for the space or for the occasion, right? And so if you're going in there with like hashtag good vibes only feel, right, then it's like let people know, right? And you can say that, oh, I've had a really like tough month, but I just want to focus on like fun holiday vibes. Like let's not even mention work at all. And that's great, right? So like focusing on that good piece, what your hope is for the people in the space, makes it a little bit easier, you know?
Yeah. I think like when we're talking about like how do I set these boundaries, I think for me like a lot of the like a great way to like dissipate the anxiety of setting boundaries can just come from like getting really like crystal clear with yourself about like what the warning signs are for like when am I going to start feeling unsafe, when do I start feeling uncomfortable. And like a little example for me for that was like maybe a full month before Thanksgiving, I was talking to my partner and I was really stressed and anxious about the idea of going home for the first time in 2 years. And so I was like, when am I going to know that I need to take a break? When am I going to know that I need to like go outside or like tell somebody that I need some like personal space? And he looked at me and he just said, when you're feeling like this, because I think he could tell that I was feeling stressed. And I had never really put it in that simple of a context before. Like when you start to feel yourself cycling, when am I going to need to do this thing? It's probably a great sign that you're just ready to do that thing. And that really helped me set a boundary with myself about when I knew that I was going to need to take some space and to step aside, which is really super useful.
I actually might steal that as like my closing thought, or like tie it to my closing thought.
Please take it.
I think, yeah, thank you. Generous. Happy holidays. Is that it feels like, and it loops back to honestly something, Olivia, you originally planted the seed of that piece about like, what if I don't know if I'm uncomfortable or unsafe? And like, that's like kind of what it sounded like your example was, Mackenzie. And I think that it almost feels like it's like, if you're not sure, bake in some like time and space for you to be able to like take a moment, right? Like we talk about that so often, like the concept of being an active bystander to speak about it. And we're like, being an active bystander isn't about taking people's choices away. It's just giving them a second to think, how are you feeling? And this feels related. Like you be your own active bystander, right? Like, I've got to poop now. Goodbye. Right? Like take like a moment in the bathroom, or be like, cool, I'm gonna like take a quick walk, or like fake a call to a friend or something. But give yourself a little bit of time to be able to think about, all right, what is it that I actually am feeling right now? And like, what do I need to not feel this way?
Two quick closing thoughts. One, I love to, when I visit people, I have a dog, and the dog walk is always built-in scheduled time that I'm alone. It doesn't invite other people to come with me because nobody else wants to touch my dog's feces. So it's a good opportunity to check in with myself, even not when I'm having to make a decision or having to set a boundary. And the second thing I will say is, it is also totally valid to be like, I'm not sure yet, right? If you can't get space, or you don't, or you think it's longer than the time it takes you to poop, I'm not sure yet. Let's check in tomorrow. Perfectly valid thing to say.
My closing thought is bring in activity. Bring a book. Bring a video game. Like, really cannot, the power of that cannot be underestimated.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, I guess that seems like it's everything.
I think
So,
we could be talking about it for forever, but I think we did a good job.
yeah, well,
And I hope this was helpful.
yeah, happy holidays. If you care about the holidays, if you don't, happy winter. It's super cold, unless you live somewhere warm, in which case, bring me there. And with that, good day, Goslings.
Bye. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Be good to yourselves.
Bye.